When do you head to the hospital if you're planning to have a natural birth as natural as possible? As you can see, I'm down at the beach right now with my kids. We're going to catch some crabs later. So here's the thing, is a lot of people, they think that they need to follow that 4-1-1 rule or the 5-1-1 rule, where you want to know how close your contractions are. And let me just tell you a quick story here. So when I was pregnant with Michaela and I was going in and out of that prodromal labor, I did get one of those contraction apps. And I do also sometimes use these as a doula. I use this with one of my clients, but here's what I found. Those contraction apps and trying to time your contractions is a waste of time. So what do I mean by that? Well, with one of my clients, Rebecca, who you can read about inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth, she had a vaginal birth after 2 previous C-sections at home, unassisted. And I was timing her contractions, but I noticed a different pattern. It was very odd, where her contractions would space out and then they would get close together again, and then they'd space out again and she'd get a little bit of rest, and then they would get close together. Some of them would be more intense than others, and they never really followed a distinct pattern. And this is the same thing that happened in my own birth with my daughter. The thing is that physiological birth does not follow that typical pattern that you see in all of those labor textbooks. The BS that your doctor is telling you about going in when your contractions are 4 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart, you don't want to do that. So what do I tell my clients if they are planning to go to the hospital? Go in at the last possible minute when your intuition is telling you it's time to go. For Jenny, that was 1 hour before she actually had her baby. Like, she was already actively pushing when she got to the hospital. The second part, though, is if you're having a VBAC, you don't just want to go in pushing. You also need to have a doula or somebody who's going to hold that space for you. But ideally, you want to have a doula with you to hold that space and protect that, while your partner is also helping you and supporting you. You also want to make sure that your partner is pretty much prepared, that if they need to catch your baby because you're standing, that they're prepared to do that, and that you're prepared to catch too. Because oftentimes the hospital wants to assess you with vaginal exams like they tried to do with Jenny, and Jenny said no. And the nurse is like, well, I need to know if the baby's coming. And the doula's like, yeah, the baby is coming. You should probably call the doctor. And the nurse did not budge. And she tried to get Jenny's blood. And Jenny's like, you're not taking my blood right now. And she wanted to take the blood because in case Jenny needed a C-section, they needed to know what blood type. Like, come on. Seriously? like, you just, the checklist that these nurses have, like, they are just so in that environment where they don't understand how physiological birth works. So if you want an empowered natural birth, here's what I tell all my clients and what I'm telling you. And it's also outlined in my book, Your Empowered Birth, which is now available on Amazon. You can learn more about that on my website, links in the bio. But the thing is that you want to aim for true physiological birth. Like Rachel Reed talks about in her book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, and what a lot of midwives have been talking about for years. Aim for true physiological birth, and then follow your intuition and your instincts that tell you whether or not you actually need any help or not. Which means you need to get past your fear. Because if you're coming from a place of fear, then you think that there's something wrong, but there really isn't. And that's when you end up giving in and crumbling under the pressure. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're hiring the right people around you for their birth team. You need the right support around you. You need to also choose the right birthing environment. So if you are planning to go to the hospital, make sure it's not a hospital that wouldn't know physiological birth if it hit them in the head. And make sure it's not a hospital that if you show up pushing and they say you aren't allowed to have a VBAC or VBAC after multiple cesareans, that they're not going to push the baby right back up. And make sure it's not a hospital that's going to hold you down when you try to get out of the bed and go home because you don't actually want to be there and you recognize you're fine. Because again, this causes all kinds of problems. You want to have that right environment. So that's what I have to say about when to head to the hospital. It's the last possible minute. Not the 411, not the 511 rule, not when contractions seem to start picking up. Because if you get to the hospital and you're not actually in full-on active baby is coming now labor, then what happens is that your labor is going to shut down. And then they're going to say, oh, we've got a problem. Or it can even happen where I was pushing in the pool, in the tub, and they pulled me from the tub, and then it ended up taking me 3 freaking hours to push my baby out because the physiological process was interrupted. And I had confirmation of that from one of the lovely ladies over at Your Badass Natural Birth. If you're not following that channel, make sure you do, because they are teaching a lot of the same stuff that I also perpetuate. Same thing with Rachel Reed. If you're following Midwife Thinking, Rachel Reed, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. These are the ones that you want to listen to when it comes to planning a true natural birth. You don't want to follow mainstream. You also do not want to follow doctors because, again, they don't know physiological birth. They're going to tell you the wrong things. And you're going to fall into those natural birth traps I mentioned in my book, Your Empowered Birth. All right, I'm going to go and catch crabs with my kids now. Talk to you soon. Have a great weekend. And if you want, you can go check out Your Empowered Birth. Links in the bio. Bye.